Howdy folks, Greyhawk 4x4 coming at you again, your resident vintage gamer. Today's video we're going to do an update on the campaign. And we did not do a video last week because we didn't play last week. We were down 2 people, and I have decided that as a DM, if I'm down that many players, if we're down 1 person, we can get by. They'll have to fill in that person the next time around, etc. But 2 or more, that's it. We're not playing. Because when the other people come back, then it takes up time to try and get them up to speed on everything. It's just an extra hurdle to get through for a conducive game. And I have no problem taking a week off here and there. It gives me more time to prepare and everything. So that's why there was no video last week. So now I'm going to start off with, if any of you that are watching this have never played Temple of Elemental Evil for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't know for 5th edition, because they do have the Temple of Elemental Evil is in 5th edition. I don't know if you definitely play 1st or 2nd edition, the original one. There will be spoilers if you continue watching. I have no idea, because I haven't read the 5th edition one. I have no ideas if what I'm going to say is also spoilers for that one. But it may be. So you've all been warned, just to let you know. Now, that's for viewers. Now I'm speaking specifically to my players who play in my campaign. There are going to be spoilers over and above everything that you guys experienced this week. There's going to be spoilers going forward as well. I'm going to be talking, I may allude to things, I may say things outright, but just so you know, I would prefer that you don't watch this video because of that reason. So, there, everybody's been warned. Now we're going to go ahead. So to give a quick, real fast recap where we left off 2 weeks ago. Our adventurers had made it back into the temple via the secret tunnel. They like to approach it from the farmhouse entrance and go along, rather than going through the tower outside the temple entrance. So they come in, and I don't know what this makes, how many times they've come in this way, but going way back, the very first time, the basilisk turned one of them to stone. They had to exit out, get him brought back, stone to flesh type of a deal. Came back here recently, and now this is like their 2nd or 3rd foray in, because this room where the basilisk was is also extremely deadly, as we talked about last time. They had the fight with the assassin and the magic user, which, if you include them losing somebody to poison, or almost losing somebody to poison on a poison trap at the farmhouse, you're talking about 3.5 deaths of party members, and then 4.5 if you count when the guy was turned to stone, when our gnome was turned to stone the very first time. So 4.5, 4 3/4 player deaths, party member deaths, to get to this point. So they've defeated everything. They had started to search the magic user's room, and there was a parchment on the wall, and of course that was trapped. That blew up on one, and they all decided, that's it. We're getting the shit off the bodies, or taking the bodies with us. We're getting out of here, because we've got dead party members we've got to deal with, etc. And so they took off. They went to Devers. They got rezzed. It took several days to get everybody resurrected and raised and so forth. And a lot of gold, and a lot of promises. And they got all that done, and then they regrouped and said, okay, now we're going to go back again, because we want to finish searching all that stuff. But this time, we're taking some extra muscle. So they hired, in this particular session, they hired some fighter types. They went to the training hall, which is run by Drac, who they've known for years, not years, but in game time, in real world time they've known for years, but in game time they've probably known him for over a year, you know. And they've been going there for some of them have been going there for their training and so forth. And he hooks them up with 3 third level rangers that were all childhood friends who decided to become adventurers, and they have dipped their toe into it, and they've gotten up to 3rd level, and they're at the training hall seeking some more training, and our party basically hires them out. So now they've got 3 additional ranger fighter types, and our gnome assassin illusionist. He hires somebody from the local thieves guild / assassins guild as well to go with them and to help with like picking locks and stuff like that. So they've definitely beefed up their party. So they head out back to the temple. They go right back in the same way. They go through the tunnel. They decide to avoid the city of Nob, which is generally bad news anyway. They've decided to start using the rangers to build raft-type ferries to get across the river so they don't have to go through Nob. So they've been doing that. They started doing that on this latest foray, which pretty smart move to keep themselves, you know, out of the spotlight. And then they went back in and they start searching everything. So they managed to avoid, for the most part, if I remember, they avoided most of the traps that were left. There was a couple that were still left. They avoided those, and they did find the secret door and it took them hours of searching to find it, but they did find the one that led them into the magic user's actual laboratory. And this is where this is a huge payoff. I won't go into all the detail and everything, but let's just say there's a lot of shit in there. There's a lot of good loot and so forth. But in amongst all this stuff, there's a couple of items that are inherently evil. One is off the charts evil. The other one is just your ordinary, really, really, really bad evil. The other one is like astronomical evil. So, needless to say, the good characters won't go anywhere near this stuff, and the cleric has to be physically restrained from trying to destroy wherever this evil is coming from. Because they bag everything up and start taking it out, and the bag that has really evil shit in it, the cleric is ready to smash it with her hammer, and they have to, you know, basically restrain her and say no, and keep her separated from, because she has an uncontrollable urge to destroy what's in that bag. She doesn't even know what it is. It doesn't matter. She wants to kill it. She wants to destroy it. So the main items of note are this red wooden box. There's an little iron box about like that. Those are the two really evil things. And then there's a cabinet that has a mirror on it that radiates magic. And they can't figure out how to get it off. And so they take everything and they go back to their camp. And they decide, okay, we want to go back and try and get that mirror, because they have a feeling it's really, really powerful. So they go back to their camp, and while they're in their camp, our Brad, who plays our gnome illusionist / assassin, he decides there's a brass rod as part of the loot that they grabbed. And he decides, he tells me specifically that he wants to inspect this rod because it radiates magic, but it doesn't look like a magic rod of any type. It just, the way I described it, it's brass, and it's weird and different. And so he starts looking at it, and I made him do some checks on wisdom and intelligence and so forth. And he rolled a nat 20, if I remember correctly. And because he rolled a nat 20, I told him that for whatever reason, his mind keeps telling him that this doesn't look like a magic item. It's radiating some magic, but it doesn't look like a magic item. It looks more like a key. That's what I tell them. So they decide they're going to go back and try to get this mirror. So they go back in, and the way it's described in the module is the only way you can take this mirror off is with this brass rod. It goes into the back of the cabinet. There's a socket for it, and that's the only way that you can use it, basically like a key, to unlock it, and then you can remove the mirror. Any other attempts to take the mirror out any other way will destroy the mirror and make it useless. So one of our rangers said, hey, I'm inspecting the cabinet. I'm inspecting the back of the cabinet, the sides, everything. I have him roll a DC, and he makes it, and he says, hey, I found like a socket thing in the back of this cabinet, and they make the connection. Well, let's try that brass rod, and they successfully get the mirror out. Had they not done it specifically that way, and they had not tried any other, they hadn't tried to pry it off, they hadn't tried to pull it off, they hadn't tried anything magical to get it off, they literally hadn't tried anything else other than they were just checking the cabinet. If they hadn't done it, if he hadn't noticed that one brass rod was more of a key, and the other one hadn't found the socket, they more than likely would not have gotten this mirror. But they did. And the mirror turns out to be a mirror of mental prowess. Now, if you want to Google that, under Dungeons & Dragons Mirror of Mental Prowess, it does a lot of cool shit. A lot of cool shit. But I'm not going to go into all the detail here. Bottom line is, it's a powerful item. And it's a very useful item. So now they've got everything, and they took the basilisk that they had turned to stone itself by using the spell Reflective Gaze or whatever it is, and they decide, because if those of you that have been following along, you know there's a crazy magic user that lives outside of Greyhawk that buys exotic monster and creature parts and creatures, if you can bring him a whole creature and stuff, like, because he does experiments and he comes up with weird spells based upon the anatomy of the creatures and what gives them special powers and so forth. And so they know that if they can bring this thing back to him and he can reanimate it, maybe, that he'll pay a lot for it, because it's a basilisk and it turns things to stone, and he might be able to reverse engineer it somehow. So they even bring that with them. And they had gone to the local town, to Hamlet, and they'd bought a couple of carts, wagons, to carry all this shit. So they get everything back to Devers. And they decide that the two things that are extremely evil, they had put them into a bag of holding. Just those two. They had done a process of elimination on what was affecting the cleric, etc., and they had figured out what they were, so they put them in a bag of holding, which then basically puts them in another kind of a different plane of existence by putting them in the bag, so that it doesn't affect her anymore. And so, but now they know which ones they are. They take them to the Temple of Cuthbert in Devers, and when they walk in, the paladin Clarice, she says, whoa, get that shit out of here, that type of thing. And they explain what's happening. When they explain, they say, we have these things, but they're so bad that the cleric can't be around them, etc. And she goes, well, I need to go get the high priest. So she goes gets the high priest, and this dude is powerful. And he comes out, and he tells everybody, okay, and he's the one who reaches in and takes them out of the bag of holding and everything. He first takes this red box out, and what it is it unfolds into a shrine. It's like a toy box or something like that unfolds into a shrine of the demoness Loth, and the Spider Queen, and it is horrifically evil. And he just, without question, he just takes his cudgel and just smashes the thing to bits. He just destroys it. The other one in the iron box, he no more gets and opens it, just cracks it to look to see what it is, and he had to do preparatory spells upon himself just to be able to do that, to allow him to do that. High level spells which would allow him to do that. And he knows what it is once he sees it. And he says this, he closes it, puts it back. He says this is what is known as the Orb of Golden Death. And it is a relic of evil, of unspeakable evil. And he says it needs to be destroyed. However, I need to confer with some other high-level priests to get their opinions. And he basically takes the whole thing, puts it into a different container, casts a powerful spell on there, which I'll get to in a minute, because I basically created a spell, because I couldn't find one that did what I wanted it to do, so I've now created a new spell. But he basically binds it in this chest or whatever, and says, I'm going to have to confer with them, but for now it's going to stay here. It's completely contained now, under my power of the spell and everything. And I will let you know, because he says we may be able to use this to our advantage, possibly, but I need to talk to some other people first. Otherwise, we need to figure out how to destroy it. So that takes care of those things. And then the rest of the session was them going and selling and getting things appraised of all the other loot that they got. Spell books, and they got scrolls, and they got that mirror, and they got jewelry, and they got gems, and they got there's other things I can't even think of right now. But in addition, they had checked the when they were in the dungeon, across from the magic user's room, there was the assassin's room, and they checked that, and they got the items out of there as well, which they're now back in Devers dealing with this. So that was a collection of all that shit. And one of the things that they had in that assassin's room, the assassin collected what we would call exotic weapons. She had what's called a man catcher. She had a crossbow that fires 2 bolts simultaneous. All kinds of weird daggers and fist weapons and all these exotic weapons and so forth. And so he ends up selling most of that stuff. The ranger ends up selling most of that stuff to Drac at the training hall, and he decides he wants to put that stuff on display. You know, they're not magic items, not magic weapons at all. They're just more for collectors and so forth that like exotic stuff. So he sells that stuff. So the bottom line is that's what the entire session was them figuring out how they were going to get past any remaining traps, getting the loot that they did, and then figuring out what to do with it, especially the evil stuff, and then regrouping and deciding, okay, now what do we do? You know, so that's where they're at right now. But the bottom line was that that getting to that point cost them. You know, there was 4 and almost 5 party member deaths that led up to that payoff. That's not the end of the dungeon. I mean, there is much more to come. They just happened to find one of the big payoff rooms, and they paid for it dearly. But that's where we're at now. Now, this is where we're going to get into the serious spoiler stuff. So, that Orb of Golden Death is basically a skull that is golden in color, and it has facets on the skull that have sockets they're basically sockets for special gems that go in there. And, of course, the gems are somewhere in the dungeon, supposedly, right? So no one knows, none of the party members know. The Nucid, which is that high priest in Devers, nobody knows what's going to happen if they were to get that and do that. Nobody knows what that relic would do and so forth. So there's the question of what is going to happen with it in the custody of the priest and the Church of Cuthbert, And what are the party members going to do? Are they going to go back into the dungeon, try and find these gems? They know that there are gems that go into they think there's gems that go into these sockets. That's the way the priest explained it. And we're going to go from there and see what happens. So, anyway, that spell that I was talking about, that was the last thing I want to talk about. I have these books here. And these are the second edition AD&D Compendium books. They have Priest, and they have the Magic Encyclopedia Magica. These are magic items. There are 4 volumes of this. There are 3 volumes of the Priest one. And then there's 4 volumes of, and this one I have to show you because the cover doesn't really say anything. I'll show you that way. The Wizard's Spell Compendium, there's 4 volumes of this. And I have all the volumes. And basically, for 1st and 2nd edition, I allow anything from 1st and 2nd edition in my campaign as far as magic items and spells. So, these are basically all the spells from all the rule books for 1st and 2nd edition, and anything from Dragon and Dungeon magazines, any of that stuff. I mean, and these are, there's a lot of spells and stuff. And I went through these for the priest spells to try and find something similar to Wizard Lock for priests to put, for him to secure this container, but a higher level one. And I couldn't find anything in here. Now, maybe there is and I missed it. The bottom line is what I ended up doing, I just created a spell called Divine Enclosure. And that's what he cast on this. And it takes, first of all, anybody trying to get past the spell has to be of lawful good alignment, and has to cast a counter spell of a high enough level to get past it. So it would be very difficult for somebody to get past this. But anyway, that's Divine Enclosure, and I'm going to come up with the stats for it and all that stuff. But that's how I did that. So that's where we're at, guys. And I'm already losing my voice because I talked Friday night. I talked a lot, and now I'm talking a lot again. So, anyway, guys, let me know if you have any questions. If you want to click the subscribe bell, like, dislike, whatever, leave a comment. That would be appreciated. Until next time, we'll catch you on the flip side.